In my quest to find a suitable successor to my Honda CB500X, I've been trying out the Yamaha Tenere 700 for a couple of days. Ostensibly more off-road oriented with beefier suspension and 72 horsepower, but at €10,400 here in Portugal, it's still 50% more expensive than my 500X. I think it's probably one of its few competitors though, and I wanted to give the bike a good test in all the situations I encounter. City, like here, motorway and light off-roading. So here are my thoughts, and at the risk of giving the game away, it's been a revelation. General first impressions. Well, my test bike had the 3cm lowering kit fitted, and I must say that despite measuring 6'3", I found this lower position pretty much perfect for me. It felt only very slightly higher than the 500X, maybe 1 centimeter more, and I could flat foot with no problem. It was noticeably lower than the Africa Twin I tried a couple of weeks ago, for example, and I certainly wouldn't go any higher, as I don't venture off-road that much and therefore don't need the extra ground clearance. Indeed, I asked the dealer to add the lowering kit when we were drawing up the options. Second thing I noticed was how easy the Tenere is to manoeuvre at low speed. The turning circle is tighter than that on the 500X, not by much, but it's noticeable, and this made it easier to get on and do a quick U-turn before leaving the dealer. The clutch is light and low speed fueling is spot on, meaning there's little jerkiness when moving off. The first few miles involved cutting through the fairly light traffic in the centre of Cascais. I immediately felt that the Tenere is a lot more nimble than my 500X. With 72 horsepower, it's got about 25 horsepower more, but it does feel a lot more. More even than the 100 horsepower in the much heavier Africa Twin. In normal riding around town, it even feels quicker than my 120 horsepower Triumph Street Triple, thanks I suspect to the low-down torque. This was unexpected in a twin cylinder, and so impressive work by Yamaha. I really can't overstate how good this engine is. It's the same as that used on the popular MT-07, and I remember on my way to collect the bike from the dealer, I couldn't help wishing that they'd used the one from the MT-09. However, in reality, it doesn't need any more power. The engine is a peach. One of the best I've tried, and it belies the official figures. In situations where on my Honda I'd be having to work out whether I could make that gap or safely overtake, on the Yamaha it's a breeze. And combined with the firmer suspension, it makes the bike feel instantly more alive than my slightly ponderous Honda. So surprised was I that I even re-googled the Tenere spec sheet when I got home to check that there really was only 72 horsepower. I would have wagered on at least 20 more. No bike's perfect, of course, and there are a couple of slight negatives that are more apparent in an urban environment. While the gear change itself is very smooth, the lack of a slip assist clutch means that you have to carefully match the revs on every downshift. You do get used to it, but coming from the CB500X and my Street Triple, both of which have slip assists, it came as a bit of a surprise for the first few miles, and it does make the bike seem slightly less modern. Second surprise was the brakes. They're up to the job, but way off the big Brembo M50s on my Street Triple. And the suspension setup means that the front forks dive a lot, more than I've encountered on any other bike, including the CB500X, which has soft forks. You get round this by using the rear brake more, but like the clutch, it's something you have to remember to do on the Tenere with its 210mm travel. It's also a pleasingly slim bike compared to the Africa Twin, for example, but it also feels more lithe even than the 500X, which is hardly a fatty. The bars are quite wide, but the mirrors, which don't suffer from vibration, are high enough to go over the car mirrors when filtering. All in all then, a very competent bike around town. So what about touring? Well, obviously when you start talking longer distances, comfort begins to figure more in the equation. And there's no escaping the fact that the Tenere is not as plush feeling as the CB500X. It's not downright uncomfortable, but this is one area where the Honda trounces just about every other bike I've ever ridden, so it was always going to be a tough call for the Yamaha. Because it's a tall bike, even with the lowering kit fitted that I had on my bike, The seat has to be narrow to allow riders to get their feet down, and who says narrow says uncomfortable. The Tenere's seat is both narrow and poorly padded, and I could feel my bum beginning to ache after about an hour. The tank is quite small, at only 16 litres, so that's going to give you a range of about 300 kilometres. The screen is also non-adjustable, and so taller riders like me are inevitably going to get some buffeting at high speeds. I would say it's on a par with the Honda, and that has an adjustable screen. The handguards are nice and big, so wind protection to the hands is very good. Better than the aftermarket SW Motec guards I fitted to my Honda, for example. I think you can forget about touring 2-up. There is a pillion seat, of course, and I'm sure it's fine for shorter trips, but it felt even firmer than the rider's seat, and it looks very small. My wife wasn't available to try it out for size while I had the bike, but I could tell by looking at the seats that transporting a passenger in comfort is not really what the Tenere was designed for. So what's the Tenere like on motorways? Well, the extra power here is very noticeable and much appreciated. The bike accelerates fast enough that you don't notice, and when you look down at the clocks you realise you need to back off to stay legal. Maintaining a good cruising speed is no problem for the bike, though the relative lack of wind protection means that you are going to get a bit of blast, particularly around the shoulders, I found. The main plus on the motorway compared to my Honda, though, is the lack of vibration, which is really the biggest criticism I always level at my bike. The Tenere has nice comfortable rubber pegs to damp any vibration, and even through the bars your hands stay nice and tingle free. The 500X does sound better though, at least to me. It has a slightly deeper tone to the exhaust than the Tenere, which is something I like. So what's the bike like off-road? Now this has been my biggest surprise. I don't go off-road much, mainly because I don't have the skills or experience, and I just don't feel confident taking an inherently unstable machine that weighs over 200 kilos into parts of the world where help is at best a complicated Uber trip away. Also, this particular Tenere wasn't my bike, and although it had the obligatory crash bars fitted, a £220 option, I didn't fancy dropping it. But this is an off-road bike after all. It's got a big 21-inch front wheel, generous ground clearance and grippy tyres, so I took it up this trail, which I've been up a few times on my Honda. We've had a lot of rain over the past few weeks here in Lisbon, and the trail had some fairly vicious looking ruts in the soft ground. Still, onwards and upwards, I said to myself. I've been up here a few times on the Honda, and I've always been more or less relieved to get back to the asphalt. Now, I don't know what it is with the Tenere, better tyres, bigger front wheel, firmer suspension, but it was a revelation. Going both up and down, the bike glided over all the bumps and didn't seem to flinch at all in the ruts. Incredible. My 500X would have been sliding around and making me feel distinctly uneasy, but the Yamaha acquitted itself with aplomb. So much so, in fact, that I genuinely enjoyed the experience and thought about turning around and finding a more hardcore track. I've never really bothered with off-road, as until now I've always found it unnecessarily hard work compared to the road, but it's now something I would definitely factor into the purchase of my next adventure bike. You can definitely tell that Yamaha have designed the Tenere with this in mind, and it definitely inspires confidence. Again, I don't have enough off-road experience to pin down exactly what makes all that difference, tyres, suspension or whatever, but I do know that the tyres on my bike were the Pirelli Scorpion Rally STR, as in street, and so were not the full-on Scorpion Rally off-roaders. So what about costs? Well, I've already mentioned the purchase price, which here in Portugal at least is significantly higher than that of the CB500X. We're looking at just over €10,000 for the Yamaha, compared to just under 7,000 for the Honda. Stick around just another couple of minutes to find out whether I think it's worth it. Unsurprisingly, given the 500X's astonishing frugality, fuel consumption is not so good with the Yamaha. I averaged 4.5 litres per 100 kilometres, which is about 63 miles per gallon, UK gallons. Whereas on the Honda, riding pretty much the same kind of route in the same way, I'm getting 3.1 litres or just over 90 miles per gallon. Now, to be honest, I don't do that many miles annually on a bike, so fuel consumption doesn't really bother me. Just as well, really, because I think I'll be lucky to get 7 litres or 40 miles to the gallon in my forthcoming Triumph Rocket. But if you're using your bike to commute or otherwise rack up huge miles, this difference is definitely worth taking into account. So what about other competitors to the Tenere apart from the Honda CB500X? Well, there aren't that many around at the moment. There's the Suzuki v-strom in 650 guys, which I've ridden very briefly. It's slightly cheaper than the Tenere and slightly more comfortable, but it's getting on a bit now and isn't nearly as good off-road as the Yamaha. Then you've got the bestseller mid-range adventure bikes like the BMW 850 GS, the KTM 790 Adventure, and the brand new Triumph Tiger 900. But these are 13, 14, 15,000 euro bikes, and well-spec'd versions are getting close to the big boys like the Africa Twin and 1250 GS, at least in terms of price. So to a conclusion, the good and the bad compared to my 500X. Well, the Tenere's engine is way more impressive. It's got more torque, more power, it's more tractable, it's a brilliant engine. There are no vibrations, my biggest gripe with my Honda, and off-road abilities are astonishing and made me want to do more. Negatives, well, it's less comfortable with firmer suspension and a harder, narrower seat, and it's a lot more expensive than the Honda, both to buy and in terms of fuel consumption. So you pays your money and you takes your choice. Yamaha set out to build an anti-Africa Twin, an anti-1250 GS, by creating a back-to-basics bike that's relatively cheap to own, and I think they've pulled it off. The Africa Twin I tried a couple of weeks ago left me cold, but the Tenere's honesty and simplicity put a smile on my face for the 2 days that I had it. It's the first bike I've ridden that actually makes me want to go off-road, and its engine is an absolute peach. So, would I swap my 2019 Honda CB500X for a 2020 Yamaha Tenere? Well, were I not about to mortgage my soul to pay for the Triumph Rocket that's coming in a couple of weeks, yes, I think I probably would. It's a better bike, at least for me, and I definitely think you need to try it if you're in the market for this kind of machine. As always, thanks for watching.